Good morning, everyone. We're going to give it another 30 seconds or so, and we will be starting our webinar very soon. So bear with us, and we'll be back with you very soon. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Morgan Hunt webinar addressing addiction at work. This morning, we'll explore the impact of addiction in the workplace, how to spot the signs of addiction amongst employees and indeed loved ones, tackling the stigma, and how to create an open and supportive workplace culture. My name is Claire Canary, and I'm a director at Morgan Hunt, and I also lead on HR and employee wellbeing. And for those of you not familiar with us, Morgan Hunt is an award-winning national recruitment business with 150 recruiters across the UK in Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham and London. We were established over 30 years ago, and we provide specialist recruitment services across thousands of organisations in the public and private sector. And we run events like this to talk about raise awareness among, our employee and employer population, and also to support the employer organisations that we work with. This promises to be a powerful and really honest session, and I'm delighted to be joined, first of all, by Nisha Chandra, who is a detective and outreach officer with the Met Police, and who herself has overcome alcohol addiction. And we're also going to be joined by Harj Gahley, who is an international speaker, has battled with gambling addiction and had to deal with a £250,000 debt. They will both share their lived experiences, the realities of addiction in professional environments, and how employers can better support employees with dealing with addiction. So before we start, just a few pointers on our structure this morning. Our session will last till 10:30, and that means we'll have about 45 minutes for a general conversation. And if you have any questions at any stage during our session this morning, please post those in the chat on YouTube. We will see them all and we'll endeavour to answer as many as possible. We'll try to leave about 10 minutes or so at the end to answer your questions. So, to kick off our conversation this morning, welcome again, Nisha. And can you begin really our conversation by giving us an overview of your personal experience with alcohol addiction? And I suppose why you're such an advocate today in terms of raising awareness around addiction?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. So my name is Nisha, and I'm an alcoholic. Those words I never thought I would be saying about myself out loud, let alone speaking on a webinar, talking about it very openly. Now, my whole 20s, I'm 39, by the way. My whole 20s are a complete blur. I don't remember much because coming from a South Asian background, especially as a female, there's a lot of strict rules and regulations in terms of what you can do and what you can't do, what's considered respectful and what isn't. So when I joined university, I decided to move out. Now, as a young girl who had no freedom, then suddenly has all the freedom in the world, it was overwhelming and I wasn't prepared for it and I didn't know what to do with it. University is very good at glamorizing drinking culture. very cheap drinking culture. So I found myself in a position where it was easy to get £1 a pint, £1 a shot, and that turned into a very nasty habit throughout my whole 20s. When I always knew I wanted to become a police officer. So when the applications came out, I thought, well, they're not going to have me if I have a problem. So I decided to clean up my act, get sober, and I did. I got sober for about a year, did everything I could to be part of recruitment, get my name in there, get my foot in the door, and I did. However, about a year or 18 months into my career, I relapsed. And I believe that I relapsed because of the drinking culture that is attached to being a professional. If someone gets promoted, let's go for a drink. If you're having a bad day, let's go for a drink. I found myself quite young, being young in service, and I relapsed because not only because of that, but to fit in with my team as well. And that just led to a very, very downward spiral. And I always knew that alcohol was a great factor in my life. But then having relapsed that early into my career, I thought it was game over for me. But luckily, I was able to reach out and get help. And now I can actually very proudly say that I'm almost 8 years sober as a South Asian female who works in policing.
Great. Thanks, Nisha. That's quite a powerful story. And Haj, just to kind of, I suppose, give us a bit of context around your background and why you're passionate today about talking about your experience in gambling addiction. Could give us a little bit of a background on yourself?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Claire, for having us and everyone that's turned up. And if you're watching this, hopefully anything that we say today can inspire change within yourselves, the people around you, or within the workforce. So for me, as you rightly said, I struggled with a gambling addiction, unlike alcohol or drugs. I know Nisha understands this as well. You can't see gambling. This is why it's called the hidden addiction. So for 12 years of my life, just after I left university, it started off as a very menial thing of going into a casino because my mates were like, let's have some fun, let's go out, let's carry on the party. They give you free drinks, they give you free food. And I didn't realize that moment of walking to that casino, sitting down with my friends, playing blackjack, coaching me on what to do, how to play it, all of these things that I just never knew. And the worst part was I walked into that casino and it almost felt like James Bond because that's all I've ever associated casinos to be, like this very higher class, upper echelon, and that's what the cool people do. So when I sat down at the blackjack table, I turned £20 into £60 within about 30, 40 minutes. So in my head, this is great. This is free, easy, quick money. So what happened was over the 12 years, so from 2009 up until 2020, it went going into casino every other week. Then it went every week, every day. There was one point in my life where I spent 48 hours in a casino. And I mean, I didn't go home, I didn't shower. I literally was betting in a casino, ups and downs. I had my little systems. I tricked myself into fooling that I could actually beat the system. And I want to touch on that, which is I was fooling myself to think I could trick and beat the system. Then I found that bookmakers made it easier to do the horse betting, the dogs, and then came the rise of these Vegas in your pocket. And that meant I didn't need to go to a casino. I didn't need to go to a bookmaker. Everything that I needed was there on my phone. And when I was in my corporate career, I want to give you a context of what my day would look like. There was times where I knew that money would hit my account. And when people had woken up to get ready for work, say 6:30, I'd wake up about 4, 4:30 and gamble away a month's worth of wages, even before someone has even got up. Depending if I was up and down that month or week or day, I'd be on the work, playing auto spins in the car, driving to work. When I got myself into work, I'd book myself into meeting rooms so I could gamble. I'd be gambling at lunch, on breaks. I'd even miss out on night outs because I want to basically say to myself, I'm just down or I'm up and I want to carry on this thrill. I'd lie to my wife. I've got more work. I'll take it home with me. There's so many different aspects of gambling. My wife would have thought I had IBS, the amount of times I spent at home in the toilet.
Yeah.
But there was a point where coming out of this, there was a specific moment in my life where I had to get recovery during the pandemic. And through that recovery journey, not only did I understand more about myself and what triggered that addiction, I actually did the biggest thing that I think a lot of men are afraid to do, which is ask for help, because there's some strength in that. But through my recovery, I also realized, well, I'm not the only person that's going through this. I've seen people in the casinos, I've seen people in the bookmakers, I've seen how gambling destroys families, health, career, relationships, finances. So if I can inspire people with my story and be a beacon of hope and advocate change and recovery, then I'm walking my purpose. And that purpose came from somewhere.
Yeah. Thank you, Harj. Um, and I mean, Nisha, I'm struck by the fact that you managed to, you say you got sober, you realized actually I still have this dream to join the Met Police, and that's what I always wanted to do.
Mhm.
And you joined, and you were sober at that point, but then you relapsed, and we can come on to talk about that. But can you talk me through how trying to grapple with that alcohol addiction while you were still dealing with it and your work at the same time, what kind of impact that had on you personally, maybe your mental health, even your professional kind of output?
Absolutely. Before I relapsed, like I said, my whole 20s, my addiction was at a point where, like Harj said, most people wake up to get ready for work and he'd wake up a few hours before to gamble his month's wages. So most people would wake up and have a cup of tea or have breakfast or have coffee. I would wake up and have alcohol because I needed it to get me through the day. This was before I joined policing, by the way, but in my whole 20s, that is what I remember when my addiction got so bad that I needed it in the morning. I needed it from whatever time I woke up because I could not function without it. It was, it was that bad. And then coupled with trying to figure that out and be the dutiful daughter or the dutiful sister while still living at home and trying my best to hide this problem from my family, which I didn't do a very good job of because everyone in my immediate family knew of what I was going through. But I guess in a way chose to we're very good as South Asians to ignore an issue as opposed to like full on face it. So silence is golden. You don't talk about it. You let it happen in the background, but you don't talk about it. And then professionally, when I did join the world of policing, I became what is known as a functioning alcoholic. So I wouldn't drink while I was at work, but while being at work, all I could think of was, right, when's the day going to end? When can I actually go to the off license or go to the pub and have my peace? So every time my shift ended or my day ended, that was the first thought that came into my mind. Right, I need to get out of here. I need to go to the shop or I need to go home, and just start drinking. So I was very, very functioning, and coupled with that was that my mental health was declining. I've heard about depression and anxiety through the years, but I never thought that someone like me would ever suffer from depression or get diagnosed with depression. And I did in 2017 in the autumn, where my drinking got so out of control that I didn't know why I was feeling this way, this constant feeling of a dark cloud over my head. And that was at work, that was in my personal life, and I couldn't shift it. Crying for no reason, just feeling this overwhelming feeling of sadness that I just could not shift from. I decided to go and get an appointment with with AGP. It was after hours, so it was in the evening. And I remember this day so clearly because it was raining and the smell was so kind of, when rain kind of evaporates, that kind of smell, and it's still under my nose. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and walking into that GP office with my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, and explaining to the GP within 7 seconds, I am feeling like this and I don't know what to do. She stopped me right there and she said, I'm going to diagnose you with depression. You've got depression. However, you have to make a choice. Here's a prescription of antidepressants and here's alcohol. You can't have both. You have to make a choice. And that was the moment, that penny drop moment for me. I chose to live. So I chose to take the prescription of antidepressants to sort this out, which I hoped it would sort my addiction out. And it did.
Yeah.
And I've never looked back. I'm still on these tablets because they help me. They keep everything level. So that is how it impacted my mental health.
Thank you. And Harj, you talked about kind of juggling and, gambling being that hidden addiction where you come into work, but you book a meeting room because you need to go and get on your phone again or try and gamble. So what kind of impact while you were actively gambling was it having on your life, professional, personal?
Well, that's a loaded question, but everything that you can think of, because in this world we talk about compulsive gamblers, but we're also compulsive liars. So the secrecy, the lies, where's the money going? Why is this debt letter here? Why are we getting these bailiff letters? Oh, you're absentee from work. What's going on? That doesn't look like Harj. That doesn't sound like Harj. So what's happening? It's anything that I could do to protect that gambling because at some parts it became a coping mechanism for the stresses that I put myself under. So yes, it caused, the personal destruction. There was times where I begged, I borrowed, I stole from money, all while knowing that I didn't have the means or I could pay these people back. So not only did I become a Tasmanian devil for destructions of relationships around me, I I chose to be in that place because I needed money to fuel my gambling addiction. Because once the pay went, I need to go and get it from somewhere else. But that then also meant, which is, well, you've got this deadline on this project, or there seems to be this not happening, or where are you here, and can we do this? So professionally, I found myself of productivity dropping, and I'm going to say something which I don't openly say it at all, which is I actually stole from employers before as well because I used to manage multi-million pound marketing accounts. And because of that, there was one organization they couldn't even go public with this. So I didn't realize at the time because the only way I can describe having a gambling addiction is someone taking your brain, hijacking it, and holding it to ransom until you do the thing that it wants you to do, which is absolutely take as much money and destroy your life. So my health, both physical and mental, there was a time where I was only eating crisps and sandwiches at one point because I didn't have money, and even when I did have money, I needed that money to gamble. Like I talked about the finances in my life, and then the biggest thing that happens with most household is what arguments, and those arguments are either communication or debt or finances. Relationships, I talk about that, but not just personal. Those friendships that I built within the workplace, where I've borrowed money from colleagues, I've taken money from other companies to just fuel this addiction. So the biggest issue I could say was I started losing myself and who I was and what I could actually bring to the table, not just in my professional life, in my personal life. And I just kept giving it to gambling because the only way I could say this, it's gambling became almost like a toxic relationship. It almost became like a mistress in my life. And no matter whatever I was doing, I just kept getting drawn back into that world. So
Yeah,
it does destroy more than just the gambler itself.
yeah, everyone around. And I mean, as you mentioned this, you mentioned you started by going to casinos with friends, but I'm kind of aware, you talked about the phone turbocharging gambling, which it has, and not to even talk about the kind of advertising that even children are being exposed to, and in terms of gambling, and you look at football and it's everywhere. So did you have any kind of experience of gambling before you went to those casinos with friends, in terms of anything to kind of measure it by? Did and think, oh, this might not be normal, or oh, it's okay because I've seen other people in my family or my friendship group gamble?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So I think there's this concept, and I think Nisha touched on this, which is that people pleasing and fitting in. Your friends are going out, they're drinking, they're having a good time. Some of them, I've never done drugs in my life, but I could see some people doing that. And sometimes it's easier just to follow the norm and fit in without feeling ostracized, because we all fear connections or love or not fitting in. And not only that, when part of my therapy and recovery, I also realized that at home there'll be functions, whether it's a wedding or a party, where I'd see my adults and my dad and my uncles playing this Punjabi game called Babbi, which is a card game. And they would bet with each other. So you don't realize these things are happening at a young age, but it almost becomes normalized. But then you think to yourself, what I'm doing is not an issue because I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not physically beating anyone up, but maybe that's the lies you tell yourself. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm the one doing it. It's my finances. I'm the one that's, if anything, I'm the one that's hurting myself, right? And that becomes delusional. But you said something as well, which is, the awareness, you're when you go into that addiction state, you almost put these blinkers and blinders on because you don't want anything to distract you and that addiction. Um, and you don't become aware of what's around you because you're so focused in that world. But you are right. Look how many, you can just turn the TV on now. You can turn to social media. You can turn to YouTube. Like in the UK, the gambling industry generates 15 billion in revenues, and of that, 1.5 billion goes to advertising. They're not
Yeah.
silly. They're not
No.
stupid. There's a specific reason, and you're
Yeah.
right. The weaponization of social media influencers. There was a study done by Gambleware recently which said there are 27% of 11 to 17-year-olds have gambled in the last year. Bear in mind, gambling is illegal for anyone under
Yeah.
18. So how
Yeah.
is it even possible?
That's mad. Yeah, that's crazy. Thanks, Haj. And Nisha, I'm struck by something you said. I mean, you said, your family didn't talk about it. And I think, yeah, there's an element culturally that might be because of your background, but I think actually that's unfortunately all too common sometimes in people close to an individual with a problem or an addiction, because people are aware, but they're just nobody. It almost feels like if we don't talk about it, then it doesn't exist and we can go on ignoring it. But can you talk about that kind of extra challenge of social stigma that you dealt with? Because you've talked about being a woman from a South Asian background and kind of the extra layer of difficulty that kind of brought for you in terms of trying to deal with your addiction.
Absolutely. As a woman from this culture, we're always taught to be the strong one, hold the family together, don't bring shame to the family in whatever you do. But when someone like that then has a problem, such as alcohol addiction, it's a complete no-no, because to an extent, and Harj will agree with me, not that it makes it right, but to an extent, alcohol is very glamorized and glorified amongst the men in our culture. So if a man has a drink or has somewhat of a problem with alcohol, it's okay. He had a hard day at work. He's allowed to drink and wind down. But then a woman is not even supposed to be drinking. And then when a woman's not even supposed to be drinking, and then she all of a sudden has a alcohol addiction, it's like, whoa, how do we navigate this? Because it's not meant to happen. So the best way for people to navigate that is to just be hush about it. Don't talk about it. When you go to weddings and parties, don't expose it. If you are going to drink, just sit in the corner quietly and feed your addiction. Don't make it obvious to people. Then also walking into quite a male-dominated environment when it comes to policing. That is another challenge within itself, because having grown up with these values that I'm supposed to uphold as an Indian woman, and then I go into a place where it's 70% male when I joined, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to be one of the boys. So for me to be one of the boys, I have to drink, I have to have a pint in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and just be part of that culture. And that's where it kind of just, it spiraled and it went downhill for me. Yeah.
It's that piece you mentioned it, Harj, about that kind of acceptance, doing things because you'll be accepted quicker by the group. And even though we're grown up at work,
Yeah.
we still do it. We all still do it a lot, and it's hard to break out of that.
Also, on that, I was just going to add another point, which is there were times, where we talk about cultural differences. Would they even understand? Because remember, there's cultural difference, there's societal differences, there's religious differences. So even if you go to someone and say, "This is what I'm going through," and in our language, and especially in our community, we have the word "sharam," which means shame, or "izzat," which means honor. We talk about values. Would they understand what that means and why it's so important to us and why that holds us in our fear and a place of secrecy? No. So then it's easier just to stay quiet and just fit in with the crowd again.
Yeah, it almost encourages more secrecy. And when you're dealing with an addiction anyway, a lot of people will naturally do that, maybe secretively, because they have an inkling this is maybe going too far, but then that as an extra push. Yeah, that makes sense. And Harj, in terms of, you've talked about how you would operate at work when you were gambling. Are there signs that, loved ones or employers you think can be watching for to maybe spot a problem gambling addiction, bearing in mind that it is hidden and it's not always, we won't see the it happening maybe in front of them, but what should people be looking for?
Yeah, so great question because as we said before, gambling isn't like drugs and alcohol, where if you see someone like that, you might see them stumbling over or slurring their words. So so even though it's hard to maybe spot a sign of someone that's facing gambling, there are some little tweaks. So little subtle signs such as change in behaviors. Is someone being more secretive, distracted or irritable, or even suddenly unavailable? There were times where I was on this emotional roller coaster. I'm with you, I'm not with you, I'm not here. Remember, I said the compulsive gambling has compulsive liar traits as well. Financial red flags is another one. I think that's a huge part because gambling requires two things, time and money. So are people asking you for money, or are people secrecy around money? So if you're in a relationship, is your partner hiding their bank statements, constantly on their phone, hiding you, almost that level of secrecy around money? And if you ask them, can we do this? Or there are times where we're going to go meet our friends, or we're booking holidays, but then out of nowhere, oh, we can't do this because I've got a work trip, or I've got this to do, I've got this assignment, I've got this project. So those are financial red flags just to be mindful of, like payday loans. Are they taking out more credit cards? These are little subtle hints. And then the biggest thing, which is extroverts become introverts, introverts can become extroverts. So notice these little change in behaviors and patterns, because if you can notice these little subtleties, that may just open up the conversation, not with judgment, but from a place of compassion and empathy.
Yeah, yeah. And from your perspective, Nisha, what signs, I don't know whether any employer or anyone within the organization that you were working in kind of spotted anything or reached out and tried to help. But what do you think employers or indeed relatives, need to be watching in terms of, say, alcohol addiction?
Absolutely. So work-wise, no one reached out to me because I became very good at hiding it. Very, very good at hiding it. And you'll notice that with people, they will do everything they can to refrain from admitting or even showing signs that they have a problem. So in certain aspects, yeah, it can be very, very hidden. But I think on the whole, people's behavior, if there's a sudden shift in someone's behavior, when, like Harj said, you were once upon a time you were available, and then you suddenly become unavailable in terms of work, and it starts affecting your productivity and the way you are, then I think that is a massive, massive red flag. And from a personal point of view, I know everyone's different. When I used to try and, like before I joined policing, when I used to try and hide my problem from the outside world, even if I'd had like half a glass of wine, I thought that was okay. It was enough to, keep me level, keep me functioning, whatever I needed to do. And but people used to tell me that even half a glass of wine, my pores are they used to let out that smell. And I couldn't smell it, not even just on my breath, because you'd brush your teeth, you'd have mints,
Yeah.
or you'd have a
Yeah.
cup of something to mask the smell. But I'm talking about like my body, and this is like after like bathing and everything. So my pores would let out that smell of alcohol that not only I couldn't smell, but the other person could. So if I was on a bus or on a train, the person next to me at 7 in the morning will probably be like, she's either hungover or she's on it again. And that is
Yeah.
something to be very, very mindful of as well, because certain smells, certain behaviours, and it all adds up, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And being off sick as well,
Yeah.
if that's not normal for a person, or coming in late into work and a bit rough, or just looking a bit disorientated.
Yeah.
It's all red flags, and you have to ask that question like more than once. Are you okay?
Yeah. And that's the thing, I think, particularly for employers, because you don't want to cross that line.
Yeah,
But equally, if it's impacting on the individual, it's impacting on the team, it's impacting on the organization.
absolutely.
So, Nisha, what can employers, or even, I mean, there'll be people here who are relatives or friends and they suspect someone's got an issue. Um, what's the kind of first step that you would say to that individual who thinks, okay, I'm working with someone, or someone in my family, and I'm very worried about them? What's that first step?
For me, it will be, if you're a family member or a loved one or someone in your circle is going through something like this, are they becoming so withdrawn from you to the point where they were something as simple as all sitting in the living room or watching a film, and that was, say, the done deal every Friday night, and then now all of a sudden they just want to be stuck upstairs in their room, or they just want to be out until early hours of the morning, because that was me. And silence. And if I just needed to spend a lot of time by myself, and I cut everybody off, and I lost friends in the process as well, because for me it was just about, right, I need to get my fix, and I need to do that by myself. So a very sudden shift in behaviors, I think, is a massive, massive sign
Yeah.
that someone's going
And
through something.
yeah, thank you, Nisha. And Harsh, from your perspective, what's the kind of first conversation or step that an employer maybe can take to try and reach out and support someone if they suspect they see all of these red flags and they suspect there's something going on?
So to frame that, I just want to give you some context because I think it's important that the work, whether you're a corporate or you work in HR, that I know Morgan Hunt works a lot with the public sector, right? So I think the Office for National Statistics in 2024 said that the public sector employs approximately just over 6 million people across the UK. Um, but CamCare, I've worked with them on a study which showed that 1 in 10 adults in the workplace have suffered some form of gambling related harm. That's about 600,000 people in the public sector. So so it is happening. So let's not put a blind eye and turn away from it. So my biggest piece of advice is lead with compassion and curiosity, not judgment. Because when you notice the signs, we automatically go, right, the person going through this is like, are they going to judge me because I really got my back up against all that. I'm fearing losing my job. I'm fearing losing my career. That's going to impact my finances. So if you can open up and just share with them, just saying, look, we've noticed that you've been a little bit absent. We noticed that there's been an erratic shift in your behavior. we are not here to judge you. We just want to make sure that you and your family are okay. And if we can have a little bit more insight into what it is, then we can open up pathways for support. And please, when I say this, support is not a technological EAP. I know every organization has an EAP policy and programs within their workforce. If someone has opened up to you about something so critical in their journey, we are human beings, so let's lead with humanity as opposed to technology. A simple 10-minute conversation saying, here are some fantastic pathways that are free, that can support you without any judgment, where you can start noticing more about what's happening in your life, that they can support you. Because let's be honest, some organizations can't because they want to protect their profits, they want to protect their productivity and their assets. I totally get that.
Yeah.
But we also have to also take into consideration the people that also drive that productivity and profits too. So
Yeah.
I would make sure that understand that gambling addiction is a health issue. It's not a moral failing, and you literally have. I say this: conversations cost nothing, but they can cost you everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good bit of advice. And Nisha, looking back in your experience, do you think there was more or something more that perhaps one of your bosses could have done to support you, or did you make it quite difficult for them, maybe?
I think, like Harj said, we have to lead with humanity. Having that 10-minute conversation can be the turning point for some people, for a lot of people actually. In my organization, I didn't even know if I wanted to seek help. I couldn't tell you where that help would be, because employee assistance programs and wellbeing hubs and services like that, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is very specifically catered to a particular problem, whether it's physical or mental. I've not come across anything that says, if you've got any kind of addiction, here are some resources.
Yeah.
And in my whole kind of over a decade of my career, being on training programs and things like that for new recruits as well, or for managers, I've never come across anything that says, right, if a team member of yours comes up to you and says, Sergeant, I think I've got a problem, or you start noticing signs and you approach them, I've not come across anything like that.
Mm.
So that needs to be embedded into, not just in the organisation that I work for, but in a lot of organisations, the training, the awareness, how to approach a team member if they come up to you or you go up to them and ask if they have got an issue.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point, Nisha. Thank you. I'm just going to share some comments somebody's mentioned, saying thank you for your insights and honesty. I was a gambling addict. I went to Gambling Anonymous and recovered for about 3 years. However, a different form of gambling took over in the form of day trading, stocks, futures market. During COVID, it started and I'm unable to come out of it still, and it's destroyed my life again. And someone else commenting that crypto and share dealing is massive and people don't see it as gambling, but they see it as investing. So, I mean, Harj, from your perspective, and even, taking that into account, because that's not,
Yeah.
People might not like that, say, oh, that's not an addiction, that's not gambling, that's investing, and I'll leave them be. But what advice do you have for leaders, employers who wish to break the stigma around addiction? And how do they kind of foster an open, supportive culture, in your opinion?
So there's two things there. So first, yes, I agree. So if we look at the term um, gambling, it's an element of risk and reward. Yes, we've got the crypto, you've got the forexes, you've got the day trading, but even beyond that, we talk about loot boxes, FIFA packs, all of these things that are gaming linked to gambling, which are around the children's side, that isn't even classed as gambling. So there are so many different aspects that we could class as gambling, and I've never been sort of anti-gambling in that sense. I've always been anti-gambling harms. So I want to make a clear distinction here. But the flip side of this is that something which shocked me when I got into this space, and more I got into the advocacy, the research, and helping people, less than 10% of corporate organizations actually have a workplace charter or workplace policies for gambling related harms. This what goes back to Nisha saying. What they've done is either amalgamated something which is drugs and alcohol, which 85% of workplaces have, and they just mash something together. But there are, like I said, there are different nuances, there's different issues, there's different things. So understanding that actually having a robust gambling workplace policy not only protects the organization, but it also protects the people too. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed. But the second thing, it's awareness, like anything. You know, if you're given a car without showing how to drive it, it's very likely you're going to crash it. So what I would say is that, I know that we do this, we offer training, which is awareness training, which is what is gambling, like we talk about Forex, etc. What are the signs, who's affected, but more importantly, how do we offer free, confidential, non-judgmental support? So workplace charters, workplace policies, training, awareness workshops. The more awareness that you can create in these organizations, it allows not only the organizations to be more adept and actually go, we know how to handle this internally, but secondly, the organization and the people might feel more confident with reaching out to someone in their workplace because there's something, like Nisha said, there's something in our workplace that we can go to and actually provide a channel to go, right, here's how we're going to support you.
Yeah, yeah, not some vague, non-focused way.
And no EAPs.
Yeah, EAP, which is the answer to everything. Nisha, I'm kind of struck by what you said, and I think the fact that what brought your alcohol addiction back, one of the factors was going into a workplace where you felt the need to fit in. It was very male orientated workforce at the time, and the drinking culture. And I think I'm still struck by how many social events at work still center around alcohol. It's almost like we have no imagination to do anything else. And it kind of is the easiest, it seems like the easiest thing, maybe for bonding or whatever, but it's clearly destructive. So what's, looking back now, and you're still in an environment where I'm presuming some people do drink, you don't.
Yeah.
But how should employers navigate that and support employees who may have a problem they don't even know about? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that is a great question. And that drinking culture is everywhere, ain't it? It's like I said in the beginning, if someone gets a promotion, let's go to the pub. If someone gets a new deal or a new contract, let's go to the pub. And even team bonding, team away days, it's very alcohol centered, very alcohol focused. And I don't understand, like you said, whatever happened to using your imagination and actually having some good, clean fun with the team. Maybe doing something physical or doing something as simple as bowling, things like that. And companies and organizations need to make it aware and have this massive culture shift that things do not center around alcohol. It's simple, really. It is. It's not the be all and end all. If someone doesn't have, doesn't go to the pub or doesn't have a drink, it's not really going to change your team bonding day. And I think also when it comes to people protecting themselves as well, if there is a function or a team gathering going on in a bar or a pub, if that was, and I do still protect myself. I don't go to big gatherings. I don't go to massive like pub do's and things like that with work. I prefer small, intimate, let's go for a meal. And I think creating that culture that is accepting of someone may not wanting to attend, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not ostracized for not attending.
Yeah,
it's fine. That's your decision. Yeah. That makes sense.
Because a lot of people don't drink for not just for addiction reasons, but they just don't drink for religious reasons or for anything. So you can't ostracize and not include those people in your team bonding sessions who don't really want to be around that kind of culture.
No, yeah, completely.
I was going to say, so I remember a friend of mine, they did this recently, and I said, well, why don't you offer an alternative solution, which is, I'm not going to drink. I'll come to the pub with you. I'll sit down with you, but tomorrow morning we are going to go on a hike, or tomorrow morning you're going to come with me to church, or tomorrow morning we're going to go do this and this.
Yeah.
And if they say no, well, then you can take back your power. So little things you can choose.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. And Harj, I'm aware that, you know, in the work you do a lot in terms of training and support. And, you know, I know there's people listening right now who are still dealing with a gambling addiction that is destroying their life. So I'll come back to the kind of training available to employers. But if I'm an individual and I'm still caught in it again, and maybe I have at some point tried to seek help, but I need to get out of it again, what support's out there for those individuals?
So first and foremost, I remember we talked about the gentleman or whoever it was that had a relapse, and
Yeah,
that's okay. That's part of
yeah,
the process, and don't beat yourself up about it. I think the best thing you want to look at it's right, acknowledge it, accept it, but also look for a solution to come out of it. So I would say the biggest and best and first and foremost thing is reach out to me. I've been through where you're at. I've been through those relapses. I've been through those experiences. And there's nothing more powerful than a voice of lived experience. That because they've been where you are. So if you're listening to this, you can reach out to someone like myself. Or secondly, there are numerous amounts of support services like the NHS. I think the NHS needs to do a bit more around not just treating the problem, but understanding the person culturally, societally, etc. So they've got a lot of work to do. But there's GamCare, there's Gordon Moody, there's Break Even. You can even call the National Gambling Helpline. Just speak to someone, and they can then signpost you in the right place. Because there's nothing more stronger than owning what you've got, but then finding a solution to help you.
yeah. And then in terms of that other piece, Harj, because you do a lot of work with employers in terms of training and support.
Yeah.
So what's available to them? What resources are out there to help them kind of support, you know, particularly maybe a gambling addiction within their workforce?
Brilliant. So today I wanted to come back and give, and like I say, I always say this thing, pay it forward. In my upbringing, there's a word called seva, which is how can I selflessly give without anything in return? And I know finances and those can be an issue in corporate organizations. So there are three things that I want to offer any corporate listening today. And these are all totally complimentary, free of charge. So the first one is just an awareness workshop that where we can come in, the power of lived experience, we'll walk you through the science, a bit like what we've done today, but a little bit more in depth. And then at the end of it, not only you have more awareness, more understanding, but you can also signpost. The second one, it's if you're a frontline worker or a person that works with vulnerable people or executive, we have what we call a level two training, which can go, okay, how do I have those conversations? What can I say? What is a PDSI, but also how can you integrate other aspects within the organization? So HR, if you want to be trained on, it's a full day training, we come in, we help and deliver it. And that way, not only do you get accredited and certified for it, which is level two with, I forgot who it is, but it is certified. But you can walk away with that. And the third thing is that we've actually built an off-the-shelf gambling related workplace charter and policy, which you can literally copy and paste and embed it into your organization. So it's gambling specific. However, if you want one that's more bespoke to your organization, we can come in, we can consult once again, free of charge, because I'm not in it for the profits. I'm in it for the people that are the most vulnerable and want support.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Harj. And what we'll do, everyone that's listening, this will the information around those resources and also those organizations that you've mentioned, Harj, someone can reach out to and have a conversation with to deal with their own addiction. We'll include that in the information that we send round. I'm just noticing a comment that's been made by an individual who works, you've mentioned the NHS, they work as a peer support recovery lead for the NHS gambling service or a gambling service, and agreeing with you in terms of that hidden addiction. But they're also mentioning the issue that once someone crosses the line, it's a downward spiral and it can be very rapid with gambling, and that suicide rates are alarmingly high compared to other addictions. I've seen some stats around that, and they are. I mean, have you thoughts around that, Harsh, in terms of that?
So one thing I didn't share in my story because I didn't want to trigger people, but I'll sort of say it. So 18th of August 2020, what this person was saying was exactly that. Um, the statistic is that every year between 400 to 650 people uh, die by death by suicide, which is related to gambling. And on 18th of August 2020, I was one of those people. I actually attempted by putting my car into a central reserve on the M1. But fortunately for me, I came out of that with this purpose. So yes, suicide is heavily linked to gambling, whether it's the ideations, the thought of, or the intent of. And I made it my promise to myself. I want that number to be zero. International Men's Day this year. The theme this year is zero male suicide. So I think it's a perfect opportunity to understand that this is the landscape, and this is why awareness and all these workshops are so important because we can teach you through what you can do because a lot of organizations don't even have a suicide policy, and so we
Yeah.
bring this into the table as well. So I think lived experience will really help organizations with that.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question actually which might be worth them just mentioning now because it kind of ties into something I was going to ask. If I can ask you, Anisha, because um, uh, what advice would you give to loved ones? So it's a family setting that understand there's addiction, they know there's an addiction in the household, but the individual, the loved one, isn't ready to admit they have a problem. And they in turn struggle with their own well-being. So it's really hard to almost reach them, I'm guessing.
That
What are
is
your thoughts on that?
that is a very great, very, very great question. And I think patience is key. If someone you know, someone you're living with, or a loved one is going through addiction, just try to be as patient with them as possible. And language really matters as well. I remember when I was going through the worst of it, and my parents, and it's no disrespect to them, they meant it out of what I now realise, out of a place of love. But at the time, there were certain phrases, which I'm not going to repeat, were thrown at me, or you're a so-and-so, why don't you just stop? Because it's not easy to just stop.
Yeah.
So be patient with me, be patient with that person. And when they are ready, it will happen.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
it's trying to kind of push down that sense of judgment, probably frustration as well by the loved one,
Yeah.
and being really, really, really aware of what you say. Because if you're impatient and you're badgering or you're not going to open up that conversation. But I understand that's really hard. I know from my
Yeah.
own experience that can be really hard, because you just want to help them.
You want to help them, you want what's best for them, and you very desperately want them to stop. Totally get it, absolutely get it. But it's not an overnight thing. No one's just gonna wake up and be like, yes, I'm not, or they may, you never know. But 9 times out of 10, it's not just going to be an overnight revelation. So just be very patient with them, and be mindful of the language that you do use, like accusing tones and stuff like that. Just be mindful.
Yeah, because that person will just completely go into their
Yeah.
shell.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Hajar. I think you've got a question. Someone's asking, are you able to provide online workshops? Because this individual works for a construction company and the guys would find it difficult to leave site and even probably have a meeting room somewhere if they're, so what's the format that you tend to work in? Some of the training you mentioned?
Yeah, so all our training is both online and in person because of that very thing you said there. And did you say construction company by any chance?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we ran an online workshop for Amy, which obviously heavily in the construction company.
Yeah.
We did something recently with Network Rail because not the adults, you've got the young apprentice and the people that come through the apprenticeship programs because remember they're sort of more younger. We want to bring that conversation to it. So yeah, online, in person, we just want to get to where those organizations are and provide those services.
Right. To make it as accessible as possible. That's fantastic. Um, I mean, I'm aware there's people listening to this and they are still struggling to maybe make that clean break and channel their addiction into something as positive as both of you are clearly doing now. So maybe if I can start with you, Nisha, what advice do you have for anyone listening who maybe is still struggling with their own addiction and is unable to make that next step?
It's very important to not put pressure on yourself. Take it one day at a time. Be kind to yourself. And there are going to be moments where you might find yourself in a situation where you do relapse. I've been there. I have relapsed. But don't put yourself under undue pressure and don't beat yourself up about it. Like Harj said before, okay, you've relapsed. What's the solution? How do we get out from it? That is very, very important. Don't beat yourself up about it. Take it one day at a time. I could not stress this point enough if I tried. One day can turn into a week, can turn into a month, to a year, and then before you know it, I didn't know I would be here 8 years later saying I am 8 years sober. So then that is from taking it one day, 1 week, 1 month at a time and seeing where I ended up, and I'm here.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Harj, I'd like to ask you, I mean, you have turned your addiction, your battle into something that's very focused, but where does the strength, where does that focus come from for you, Harj?
I call it my 5 pillars: my earth, wind, fire, water, and love. So they say, people around you have a big influence. So journeying was a big part of my journey. So I had to look at environments and people that didn't serve me. And you don't need a whole army. You just need a few people in your corner where you can authentically and just say to them, this is what's going on, whether it's with your career, whether it's with your health, whether it's with your relationship. And these people aren't going to judge you, and understand that whatever happens in life, you are not alone. There are people in this call, and I'm so I get emotional when I talk about this because I get when I that person they said had an addiction and they've got a problem. This is why we do this, because if we can help that one person, then we are doing a greater service. There are people around you that are not going to judge you, but sometimes we make that believe in our story, in our heads, that I'm alone when you're not. I'm proof. Nisha's proof. There are people in this conversation that are proof. They're stronger together and it's strength in numbers.
Yeah, thank you. Anisha, what advice do you have for individuals going through recovery? You know, what gives you your purpose and focus? How do you keep that strength going? You know, 8 years, that's amazing.
Very earlier on, I had to protect myself, and I think to an extent I still do. I won't put myself in situations where I know any kind of temptation is going to be right in front of me, especially in the early days of sobriety. It is so easy to fall into temptation. For the first year at least, or the first year and a half, I didn't, and I will openly admit this, and there's nothing wrong in saying no. I would decline invitations to weddings, to parties, to family gatherings, even some Christmas do's and Christmas gatherings, because I knew that I was just going to be surrounded by alcohol. Your firsts from from the day your sobriety journey starts, your firsts are going to be so testing, so testing. Your first party, your first birthday being sober, your first holiday being sober, it's going to be completely different. Protect yourself. You are worth fighting for, and it's great. Just keep going. Keep going.
Some great advice from both of you, really. I just going to mention a comment that we've had. A lady saying she's a HR officer at an SME and a level 3 first aid mental health first aider. But you know, being aware when organizing leaving gifts, the norm was to buy alcohol, but you need to make sure you know your people, you know your staff.
Yeah.
Some people don't drink for a very good reason. It
Yeah.
may be, as you say, cultural, it may be religious, it may be because they have a problem with alcohol. And I think, that whole kind of culture of everything revolves around drink is really important to kind of kick ourselves out of, really.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, look, I mean, I found it a really, really interesting conversation. And as you say, Harj, if what we've said helps one person or somebody on the call has the strength now to maybe be that support, be patient with someone in their life that they know is struggling with something, but they've been unable to make the breakthrough, but maybe on the back of the amazing advice and the lived experience both of you have so honestly shared that they can, then that will be fantastic. Unfortunately, it's all we've got time for today. We'll keep talking forever, I think. But thank you to everyone who's joined us. I hope you found it as useful and as insightful as myself. But I'd also like to say a massive thank you to both Nisha and Harj. Really appreciate your honesty and being so brave, to share your stories. It's really inspirational. And like I say, I do hope that, the work you're doing is fantastic and that, it certainly is going to support and help others find a way through their own addiction problems. So thank you both. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.